Andreucci, is that right?
Andrucci.
Andrew
Or if you want to be super Italian about it, it's Andrucci. But
Killer.
but yeah, Andrucci. You did about as good as every substitute teacher I've ever had. So
I'll take that. There are worse things to be. And then I'm Anthony Lee Phillips. I mean, we're both writers, and I mean, we're both actors. And we're just gonna be talking about making stuff, and maybe at the end of this, have an idea for something to make together.
Mhm.
So, why don't you talk? Like, you were saying what is your experience with acting? Like, you were saying you like are kind of interested in acting. Like, what's your relationship with like writing versus acting? Like,
Honestly, I started to write fairly recently. I was before like I got into like all of this. My chosen career path was a plumber. So I'm actually like a plumber, gas fitter, like, and we call them journeymans in Canada. I guess in the US you would call them like a master plumber. So I became like a certified journeyman or master plumber in Canada, and was doing that for the last decade. And I through the work that I do, I ended up kind of suffering a repetitive strain injury that was not great. And I'm currently waiting to get a double disc replacement surgery for my cervical spine to help correct some nerve issues that I'm having in my left arm. So if I'm rubbing my neck a lot and like acting, weird, because I am, and then also dealing with that stuff. But I've put a lot of time and effort into putting space between a lot of the negativity that I connected to that. And the way that I kind of did that was exploring more of my creative side and just delving into writing. So yeah, I started writing in journals just to kind of like externalize and get stuff out of my head. Like I was going and like talking to my therapist, and she made it really clear to me that I was not an internalizer. I'm the type of person that needs to kind of get that stuff out. And I
hmm,
think with the classic kind of like toxically masculine kind of like take, especially in the industry that I was working in and stuff, like it was just like push that down, like don't be a pussy, like all that stuff. And like I've never subscribed to that. I've never felt like comfortable with that kind of stuff. But we all wear our masks, right? And yeah, so through that industry, I think that it kind of led me a little astray from who I wanted to be. And as as negative as my entry into writing kind of started, it feels like my reframing and like kind of thinking about it looks at it more as like a silver lining to, yes, I have these negative experiences and this new kind of like obstacle that I need to overcome, but I'm capable of dealing with it. I'm going to overcome it just fine. And it led me back to something that I don't think that I've really nurtured in a long time, and that's my desire to tell like great stories and write. um I haven't done like a whole lot of acting, but my experience with acting, just to answer the rest of your question, is fairly. I'd say about a year into like my kind of writing journey and everything like that. I jumped in, feet first into trying to like write my own novel, and it first started as like a D&D campaign, and I did a bunch of drawing, and I love drawing, and I do like a bunch of artwork and stuff like that, and had never done anything with those ideas. So I was like, I'm going to turn this into a novel. How hard can it be? Oh, brother. Yeah.
yeah,
So I realized I wasn't meeting kind of like the standard of like the quality that I wanted and like books that I had been reading. And like I was going through this big backlog of books that I'm sure led me to just really, really want to, bite into this and make sure that I'm doing a good job and taking it serious. So I started just practicing the writing craft, and I finished like my first draft and then didn't like it, but knew that I had something that was like worth telling. So I kind of tabled it and gave myself some space. And then I did a second draft, and, I was like, okay, like I got something, that feels like it's on the right track here, but I still have a ton to learn. So I'm going to keep on trying again. And what initially was going to start out as one novella turned into three novellas, turned into a trilogy to explain everything in this world that I want to write the story about. But now I'm writing kind of like precursor lore trilogy books to explain all the insanity that happens in the world that I like really want to write in. And I say really want to write it. I want to write all of it. So I am.
yeah,
But
yeah. There's
in
nothing more
between,
than that, where it's like I'm just gonna write this little thing real quick, and then it turns into a trilogy. I feel
yeah.
like
Well, and I think like that was like along the line, that was where I had that kind of conversation with my therapist, and she was just like, you're not an internalizer, like you need to get this stuff like out. And then I guess like it all kind of condensed down, and under all that kind of pressure and like all the uncomfortability of like facing all that and kind of dealing with all that, I'm finding diamonds in the rough now, and it feels really really nice. But I again, like I've been putting in the work for, like I'm just at the beginning of it, and I'm starting to feel like I'm starting to impress myself with some of the stuff that I write, and I can make myself get emotional when I'm writing. And when I read stuff to my fiance, she's like, "That's actually really good." And like I have a couple of friends that are kind of alpha readers that are very validating. Like I'm trying my best to be like humble about the whole process. I don't want to fillet myself too much, but like,
Oh, of
um,
course.
yeah. But
Confidence
it's
is really
really
important
nice.
in creative work. I mean, like I like I have some I have some story students, and like something that I try to tell them like right away is, you've got a creator and you've got an editor,
Hmm.
and they never work the same shifts because they ruin each other's work. The editor does really good work when they're not trying to create, and the creator does really really good work when they're not being criticized. So like there's a time for both. It's very important that you do both. But I
Hmm.
actually am a big fan of, like, in the beginning stages, you kind of do need to baby your ego a little bit, and
Yeah.
then when you have readers who it's like you're finding people who are saying this is really good, I really love this, that's the point when you can start to bring in critical feedback if you want. I actually still keep them separate personally,
Yeah.
because creator just works. I can write more faster with stuff that I like if I just edit later. I just edit later.
Uh, I actually completely agree with you on that as well. One of the things that kind of like twisted my thinking on just like writing and kind of like creative fiction and stuff in general, that I felt like it just completely course corrected like everything for me, was all writing advice is just editing advice in disguise. That that blew my mind.
Oh,
Like,
good quote.
yeah, and it just kind of, I don't know, like something just kind of like clicked, and I'm like, oh, like I'm not supposed to be proficient at all of this stuff. Like I'm just supposed to get it out, and then when I'm doing revisions, that's where I apply all of these lessons. When like, because like could you imagine trying to be witty and also scary and then write a compelling character that's like a complete and full human being like on your first pass? Like it's impossible. Like,
Yeah,
learn to love revision, because like that's where the story comes into form, right? Like,
yeah. All right, so with acting, right?
hmm,
If we're gonna do a project together, I feel like we can just make your dreams come true, right? So like if we write something where you're acting, would you rather it be like a play or a film or a short film or like a YouTube series, or like what do you think would be fun to act in?
I would. I've always loved the idea of just acting in a short film, just like a tight, contained story, something that's like 20 minutes sub, that is just very slice of life and interesting, and kind of like gets me a little bit in the more of like the know of like the process, so I can kind of like build and find a process, so I can take on bigger stuff. Because like I think I would love to make movies. That would be amazing. I would love to direct movies. I think um, I feel like I have a pretty good like personality for like communicating with people and kind of like helping people kind of keep motivated and just communicating my ideas clearly and stuff. But I also just love the synergy of seeing what other people can like bring to an idea, and just being loose enough to allow people to kind of iterate. And that's also one of the best parts. Like just working with creative people is the best.
That's the best. Yeah. And then do you have like a favorite actor or like a series of favorite actors, a favorite movie? You know?
Mm. Uh,
What
uh, that's a tough one to answer. I'd say my favorite movie still is The Green Knight with Dev Patel by A24. I
that's a
love that movie so much. um,
yes.
and, and everything that A24 does is amazing. I don't know if I would have a favorite actor right now. Maybe Keanu Reeves. He's just like a total sweetheart with just everything that he does, and then he's also a total badass in everything he does. Like I just recently rewatched the movie, The Matrix, and it's scary how well it holds up.
It's honestly a great movie. It's amazing how bad. Well, and like even then, like as an adult, I liked the other two movies more than I did as a kid.
Hmm.
But that first movie is just so hard to beat. You
Yeah.
know, and that first movie is really good. It really is like a live action anime.
Mm. And like, I was watching it with two friends that are in my D&D group that have never seen it because they're a little bit younger than I am. And I was just like, "Yo, fucking, what? You never seen The Matrix?" Like, total fucking like millennial energy. I was like, "Come on, like, we got to go watch The Matrix." So the next time we all got together, I sat them down and watched it, and like, they were both just like, "That was not what I was expecting," and just like, yeah. So we're doing a pretty cool little um rewatch of the Matrix series right now.
That's sick. And you brought up your D&D group a couple times. How many people are in that?
There is we got 4 players, and then the DM as well. So the one of the players and the DM are husband and wife, and then me and my fiance are two of the other players, and then the two friends that hadn't seen the Matrix are the other two, and the other two friends are like a little bit younger than the rest of the group, but they had never played D&D, so they were excited to try it out, and then we all just started to hang out, and 2.5 years later into the campaign, like, everybody started becoming real close with each other. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's been good.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Um, so a short film with probably some action and like a character who's like a sweetheart but a badass. So probably some fighting, right?
Maybe a little, yeah. I
Maybe a little,
like, honestly, if I were to make a short film, like, I think we messaged each other a little bit in private, and I love the idea of just like testing my metal against like a schlocky kind of like dark comedy, like something that's genuinely like haunting, but then also has some kind of like heartfelt stuff. Like, maybe
mm,
not so much action, but something that delves into the realm of like something that's like when you really think about it, is like genuinely like scary. Like,
yeah,
I think that would be fun, but also having like a comedy element to it as well, because I think that I just love those contrasting genres, and like when they kind of like mix together. Like, if you're in a haunting or scary moment, and then all of a sudden something unexpected happens and it's funny but still like kind of fucked up, like,
yeah,
I love that kind of stuff. So I would love to learn how to like write and tell a story kind of that invokes that.
yeah. What makes you scared? The comedy stuff is more about style, but like the fear, like what kind of stuff is scary?
I mean, like, I feel like I've kind of overcome a lot of different fears in my life, so I don't feel like there's a whole lot that really, really makes me scared, except for I just like the psychological trope of like the unknown, and kind of putting the character in the PO like in or like putting the audience in the POV characters kind of shoes, and then having them kind of get consumed by these like questions of like a really like angsty character that's like, oh well, like, what about this, or what is this, or like, them throwing out like all of these horrible ideas and hijacking somebody's imagination and like making it do the work for you. Like, I love that.
Yeah,
um because I don't think that what typically would be scary to me would probably be scary to you, or other people, right? But if you can get people to trick them into thinking about what is scary to them, that is kind of like a little hack that does the majority of the work for you.
yeah. Well, and also like I don't know, the tools not rules. There are no rules to making stories. And so what I
Mm,
really do is I like to find something that is like emotionally really scary and then turn that into a supernatural or a monster or like a scenario.
mm,
Um and then I do like to exaggerate and then sort of re realistic it, so to speak, sort of at the very end.
yeah.
You find that with a lot of my orcish stuff. Like my orcs, they start from a place of emotion magic. Their whole magic system is based on the Enneagram, which is like a real human thing. It's the personality type of your amygdala. You get stressed out. What type are you? Are you fear, anger, or embarrassment? Boom. And like, there's no choosing. It's a stack, so one's got to be on top, right? And I take that human concept and then I say, but it's orcs with tusks and magic, and it's tribal and it's savage, and then I exaggerate and I exaggerate and I exaggerate, and then at the very end, I sort of, when I'm sitting down to write the scene, I make everything texturally very realistic, right?
Mm,
And so like that's how it's not the only way that we can work, but that's the way that I like to work, where we
mm,
start off with something that it's like it's very intimate to you, and then we blow it up and we say what can we turn it into that is more atmospheric, more visual, more auditory. I talk about senses. Like there are cinematic senses that all of us share. Sight and
Mm.
sound. But then there are the inside senses of sight, of taste and touch and smell, and then there are like the really deep senses of like memory and dream and hallucination and focus and imagination. These things that don't require external stimuli, and
Hmm.
just like, all right, that we have an outside, an inside, and then a deep, and how can we go into each of those levels and make that thing that you're afraid of matter to each of those levels, you
Hmm.
know um
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. I love the way that you approach your creative process. I find I almost kind of do things backwards, where like I'll start with kind of an interesting idea or like a concept, and the more that I explore that, and the more that I kind of write in it, the more I find my personal qualities get infused into the things that I'm putting down on the page, and then
that's
as
cool.
I yeah, and as I find those kind of like those patterns in kind of like my ways of thinking, or like how it connects to like a particular like experience in like my life, I I find I can then start to kind of explore that, and then kind of then hop on to like your method, where I'm kind of exploding that and kind of like playing with it a little bit more. I guess it's just like an extra step to kind of the way that you described you like to work, because I don't know, maybe I'm not as in tune, um, but I just like to play with my ideas a lot until they become something real.
Rules not rules. This is
Yeah.
like, it's very, I have very strong systems, but that's not to say that you should have these systems, right? It's to say, like, let's find something together. It's not criticism. The other thing is that, do you know Ginny D, the YouTuber? She's
No,
like
I
a
don't.
YouTuber, and she did a review of Mothership, one of the
Mm,
tabletop game. And in Mothership, they sort of give you like an outline, quote unquote, for a session, and it's tombs. So like the T is transgression, and that's like Act One, and then the O is omens, that something bad is going to happen. The M is manifestation. The thing shows up, the scary thing happens, and then the B is banishment. You're not killing it, you're banishing it, because evil
mm,
does. And then the S is slumber. And then you just loop it. And like my mind immediately went to Jumanji. Transgression, omens, manifestation, banishment, slumber. And I just really like this as like, if we wanted to make something that has a comedic voice, that happens sort of scene to scene, character to character, and then casting. But to make something that's scary, using something like somebody does something wrong, somebody transgresses. They go somewhere they shouldn't go. They do something they shouldn't do to a person they shouldn't do it to.
mm,
And there are signs that, like, you should stop transgressing, or maybe you fucked up, right? And then the manifestation happens, and it's scary, and it's like, and then the banishment and the slumber. I feel like there are lots of little steps that need to go into those, but I don't know. What do you
I,
think about that? Might be a good
I,
start.
yeah, I think that's an amazing idea. Um, I can definitely apply like an entire story to that, like six times over in my brain. Like as soon as you explain it to me, I feel like I'm really on board with it. Um,
So cool.
I have this I have this kind of idea for a. I was thinking it would be kind of like an interesting short film, but I know myself, and like if I were to ever try to delve into it, I know it would become like a feature length film like really really quickly. But um,
Oh no.
yeah, what I thought would be an amazing, like kind of short film, kind of like scary idea that you could also add like a lot of really funny kind of like comedy aspects in it. And then just in like real world practicality, I just don't think it would cost like an insane amount of money to do. Like maybe I'm jaded and I just have no idea, but money isn't real anyway. So like, uh, this idea is that it's a young couple. They are madly in love, and like doesn't matter the gender, race, whatever, so on and so forth, just couple in love. And it's a fairly new relationship, and they decide to sell their respected apartments, and they want to go and they want to do like van life stuff. They want to go and they want to live in a van, and they want to explore the world together. Oh, my cat's coming to say hi.
Oh yeah. Hello, cats. Oh my goodness. Hi.
Say hi. Oh, now all of a sudden you're quiet because you're on Substack Live.
Fun happy cat.
Here, you go over here. She's a whiny baby. She meows so much. She's very, very talkative, which I love and also drives me nuts. But okay, so young couple falls in love. They sell their apartments. They buy a van. It's sweet, right? But then they kind of like miscalculate or something. Maybe they're financially like impoverished and stuff. But they want to go and tour somewhere in Europe or somewhere around the world where they have to ship the van there, and then they also have to like fly there and then go and find the van. And there's a lot of logistics, and it's a total nightmare. And money's a concern. So what they decide to do is they're like, wait a second, let's stock the van full so that we can survive a month-long journey at sea. It'll really test our relationship, and we'll just be in the van living carefree in this shipping container when it gets shipped over to wherever we're going. And then they realize slowly throughout the story they fucking hate each other. And I
Yes.
think that would be an amazing idea to kind of like just turn into a short film. And if you were to turn it into a feature-length film, I would love to add in like a little B story of like maybe one of the characters like parents, you know, is like a detective or something, or like plays sleuth and like kind of realizes like, oh my god, like my daughter or my son's like an idiot, and like I think I figured out what they're doing. And then it becomes like this whole B story of him like trying to call around and find these like shipping container companies and find out like where their van is and like try and track it all down, and then just showing like the comedy of like how fucked up like the red tape is and like how poorly managed these systems and stuff are, and they're like not able to find it. um but I just love the idea of like this couple and like all the like horrifying little scenarios that you can put them in, like being trapped in this van, and then like they burn through their power, like maybe there's like a shipping route problem and they can't, like the journey takes longer than they're expecting, so then they start like running out of food, so they start having to like ration. They run out of power, so they have to start the van and like run with like the gas like in the container and like worry about carbon monoxide to charge their batteries. Maybe they have like a power drill or something and they drill into like one container to like the next, and then like maybe they do that to the one above, and it's I think this might be unrealistic for shipping and stuff like that, but maybe it's full of just like loose corn grains, and then it starts falling into the container like an hourglass, and it's like a really kind of like you know
That's cool.
Chinese water torture kind of like analogous of like just, oh my god, like tap 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 corn grains falling in.
I love that. I love
Yeah,
That's a really cool idea, and you should absolutely write that. That's so cool. And I feel like there does need to be some sort of like third entity that tests the relationship.
hmm.
And it doesn't have to be any particular thing, but like they're in this shipping container, and they're like, maybe they think they're alone, but the van is haunted or something, or like maybe one of their exes is like on the ship or something like that. Maybe the captain is like, I don't know. I feel like there needs to be some sort of third person to
I
fill.
okay, I got one.
Okay.
So they drill into the ceiling, the corn starts falling in, right?
Yeah.
Nightmare. They're like, we're never doing that again. Stupid idea. Like, you ever heard of like the try fail cycle where like characters try things like a couple times and then eventually they succeed? Maybe that kind of goes wrong like once, and then it goes wrong like a second time. But like the third time, they drill into like the adjoining container next to them, and then they realize that they've created a small hole where they can communicate with somebody that's stowed away, and they're trying to like immigrate from like one place to another, or like they're running from the police or something. Like maybe they're like a dangerous criminal or something, and they're like hiding on the ship, and they had like the same idea, and they're like, oh, if I hide in this container, I'll end up in like China or something like that, right?
I love it.
And maybe this dude's like super messed up and like very contrasting from this couple, but like when he hears them like arguing and fighting and stuff like that, he butts into the conversation. He's just like, man, you guys need to talk about your feelings or something like that, or like just whatever, right? Like a comedic kind of like, have you ever heard of the concept of ma, like the Japanese concept of ma? Yeah,
uh,
so like that Japanese like slow down kind of like, he could be the one that like is like the ma. So like maybe they choose to like divide the container as they do, and like that kind of like roommates not getting along in a dorm kind of like trope. And then they're just like, okay, like it's my time to talk to Gregory, the prisoner in the other like container.
the demon.
Yeah, yeah. So like he kind of becomes like this weird like contrasting kind of like therapists that like they need to go and like vent to because they just can't stand each other anymore. Like that would be a fun idea.
I love it. I'm so into it. And I think they should think that it's a person, and it should, well, I mean, my mind just always goes to the fantastical, right? And so I'm like,
Mm.
it could be a demon. You know?
Yeah, no, I think
Like,
that would be great. Or maybe I don't know, maybe like they could drill a hole and then they find like a bunch of ancient treasure and then they like rub a lamp and a genie comes out and then it's just like they
that
waste their wishes on like trying to spite each other instead.
would be great. That would be great. That would be awesome. And I love the idea of like, no, it's my turn with, Greg, or, I don't know, whatever his name is. No, it's my turn. It's my turn. It's my turn. And then at the end, they're like, they finally get to meet Greg, and Greg eats them alive.
Yeah. I've always imagined like at the ending with like that B story idea of like one of the parents trying to like track down their kid once they realize like what happened. Um, I guess my brain kind of like just jumps to in this idea of it being like once everything kind of ends and they end up tracking them down and everything, the big kind of like horror kind of like twist is that like the ship never even left the port and like it was delayed or something like that. And then finally, like they pull off all these containers, and then when like they open it up, like one of them's killed the other one, and like there's maybe like a bit of like a foreshadow in the very beginning where like the parents just like oh okay like be careful sweetie like don't I don't trust this person or whatever, and then it's like it's so fine dad like it'll be fine, and then like a daughter like covered in blood like after killing like this like secretly like abusive boyfriend at the very end like opens up the container and the dad like sees her and she's like, I told you I could take care of myself dad, and then it's just like credits. Like
That's great, dude.
yeah.
You should write that tomorrow. And then,
Yeah, I
like, you're a novelist, and so you're used to the idea of like having to have volume. And the nice
mm,
thing about a screenplay is it's short. Like, it's 120 pages max, high max. You know,
mhm,
like a lot of really great screenplays are 60 pages long with like dialogue. And the dialogue is very narrow, so it's a
mhm.
lot less word count. But I feel like that's a really good idea, dude.
Thank you. I mean, as much as I appreciate that, I also try to very distinctly recognize that ideas are just thoughts that aren't anything until you actually like do something with them. So
Yeah.
I, like I try not to go off too heavily talking about like my ideas and be like, oh, I have this really good idea. I have this really good idea. Like selling somebody on an idea and then finding out that you can't execute on it is like probably how a lot of people get into like trouble. And like, not that I think that I would get myself into trouble. I'm certain I could execute on it, but there's a lot of stuff I'd have to learn along the way.
Sure, sure. Of course. Yeah. I just think that you have the tools to do it. Like, you have the tools. Like, making the movie is an entire thing, but every journey starts, it starts somewhere, and like this would start with a screenplay. Like, you
Yeah.
have to have a play to shoot from,
Yeah.
right? And so like the screenplay, you could write the screenplay. I don't feel like
I,
that's like a possibility. And like screenplays are mostly ideas. I think that it's like Tarantino, who's like, here's how you write a screenplay. You get a yellow legal pad and the cheapest pen you can find, and you write until it's done.
yeah.
And
That's what I'm doing with my novel right now. Just finish it. I've even taken to refusing to let myself get a haircut or shave or anything like that until it's done, just to like give me a motivation. Like every single time I like try to eat an ice cream cone and my mustache gets in it, I'm like, God, I gotta finish this manuscript. Like, yeah, no, I
how,
totally agree. I would love to. Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you.
how close are you to the end of your manuscript?
I am. Ooh, oh, I didn't update this. I got so I sent you those kind of example chapters to kind of change my kind of starting point. That
Yeah.
kind of
Which
that
were
gave me like a little bit of a hiccup. So it slowed me down a little bit. I was expecting to be done by the end of the month here, but I would imagine in the next 7 or 8 days, I'm gonna have the manuscript done now. So I got like 6 chapters left.
That's amazing, dude. That's a good feeling.
It is, and I'm finally at the point of like those ideas that you have that spawn an entire story, and you're like, that's such a cool scene or that's such a cool idea. I'm finally I finally wrote the entire journey and like contextually made sense to all those scenes, and now I'm like writing those scenes, and
Yeah.
it's just like I feel like maybe I'm too close to it, and I need to get some like feedback once it's done. But I feel like the last little section of the book is just going to be like unput downable. Like people are just going to be like, I'm going to be up to 3 in the morning because I have to finish with this story. Like,
That's great news, man. Yeah. So like, I think that we need like, and maybe like one more like meeting like this about this shipping container horror romance story comedy
yeah.
thing. Which I just wrote. What did I write? A van on a ship on the sea. What I put as like a working title in my head. A van on the ship in the sea. Or something like that. But like
my, my my working title is Van for Life, but written in like really like Friday the 13th kind of like horror like font.
van for life. I love it. But yeah, I mean, like to talk about like some styles and talk about the characters. Like I don't know, how do you like to build characters, and do you outline? I think I've asked
um,
you before, but if you could remind me.
Yeah, so I create a one page. So my one page I have I have like an Obsidian like template that I've made for it. So whenever I have an idea that I just want to explore a little bit more, I have a bunch of properties at the top of the Obsidian document, just like the data that it started, the people that I talked to, like when I was kind of coming up with this idea, the genre that I'm thinking about it, and then the format or like medium that it would be kind of created within, and
Yeah.
then a working project kind of like title or name, and then like title ideas as well, and then I have some tags. But then I have a premise. So like premise is, couple decides to live in a van and ship themselves to where they think they'll have a great time, but they end up having a bad time. Then I ask a thematic question or a moral dilemma. I don't like using just themes. I think a lot of your themes come from completing like writing something, and then you find those kind of themes in the patterns of the story. But I do like starting with a moral question, or like a thematic question or a moral dilemma. Like um like one of the questions that I ask in my like my kind of like moral dilemma or thematic questions of like my novel is, how far is too far in the pursuit of knowledge, or um, are you are you a bad person if you hurt people when you're trying to help them and it was unintentional, like things like that, right? Like every single question that I come up with for like a story, I feel like every single character should answer differently, and then that kind of helps me to feed into figuring out who these different kind of characters are.
Nice.
um, then I'll write a protagonist arc using that system, that trauma, misbelief, desire, need, truth system that we discussed,
Yeah.
um, just as like a really kind of quick and easy way of just like kind of building the skeleton of a character, and I'll kind of flesh them out through that point. And then I have a synopsis section after that, where once I've kind of explored all those ideas, I write a synopsis of what I think is going to happen in the story. And it's just like really fast and loose, plain language, spoiler heavy, like no romance, just that's the synopsis. And then from there, I answer 5 questions of just start with the end in mind, like what's the end, what's the climax, what's the inciting incident, what is the feeling that I want to evoke in like people that are viewing or consuming it, and then whose point of view is the story going to be told from, and if there's multiple, then what are those POVs? And then I give myself like a little section of like notes to kind of like clarify certain things. So I always start my projects with that one page after I filled out all those things, and I love having that because it feels like it's a really good document to like generate ideas and kind of get me started. um, and then it's really really fun to just completely forget about it as you kind of get consumed by the project, and then when you finish it and you come back to it, you look at the one page and you're like, this is nothing like how it turned out, it's so much better now, like
Yeah.
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 uh,
I love it. And like the whole idea of what I do is that it's story theory. It's not really like a particular method. It's like
mm,
the principles are always at play. So I typically try to figure out like what's like if I'm working with somebody, I'm working on like a puzzle game with somebody set in the book world. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out like what's your process, and then I'm going to bring the story theory as like a lens to generate ideas for the process.
mm,
Um, and so like a lot of like it is my outlining method, but the outlining method comes from the story theory, not the other way
mm,
around. I was a musician first, and like the idea of a 5 chord is rooted in the idea of there being a 1 chord. And
mm,
so everything with story theory is about like, what I do is I think of it like a circle. I think of it like a circle, like a Dan Harmon story circle, but you've
Mm.
got axes, right? And like I always go counterclockwise. You've got these 8 story moments, just like the Dan Harmon story circle, but it's all about these axes. So there's comfort, and then there's stress, and so the comfort is on the top, and it's like you start in a place of comfort, you learn who they are, and then stressful shit begins to happen, and then there's this big ugly truth moment at 5 with that
Mhm.
point, the dilemma moment. I talk a lot about dilemmas, and like especially how Alan Watt talks about dilemmas, where it's a problem is something that you can solve, but a
Mhm.
dilemma is never going to be solved. It's a fundamental, like a cosmic truth that you have to pick a side on. Justice and mercy. In an extreme example, you're like, there needs to be more mercy in the world, and then you spare someone who was falsely accused of being a murderer. And then at the midpoint, that person you had mercy on kills a bunch of people. And you have to say, like, which side do I actually stand on of this dilemma? Because it's not a
Mhm.
problem to solve. It's a case to case basis, and there are philosophical gray areas. That's a
Mhm.
dilemma, right? But like rather than think about it in that heady way, I just say like there's this character and they have an ugly truth that it would just be easier to deny. So then it would be like the place that I start with every character is their face stack, how they act under stress, and their ugly truth. Because those two things build the wounds. They build everything else, right?
Mhm.
You've got like what are they like under stress? Why do they make mistakes? What makes them
Mhm.
make, what kind of mistakes do they make? What's their stress type? And then you have this ugly truth that it's like, I kind of don't want to open the newspaper today. It would just be better to not know. And then
Mhm.
midpoint, you make them pay for it. And that puts them into that dilemma. Like an ugly truth is the moment to moment expression, the actor's expression
Yeah.
of, it's a little more visceral. So then it would be like, all right, let's name these 2 characters. What are their ugly truths? Are they a fear, an anger, or an embarrassment type? And especially if
Mhm.
you're different, like Romeo and Juliet, Romeo is an anger type and Juliet is an embarrassment type. So like you look at the way they're very similar in a lot of ways, but the way that they respond to stressful situations couldn't be more different.
Mhm. And I find, I like adding, like, layers to a character, like, I think my system of, like, this trauma, misbelief, desire, need, truth, like, when I'm first building a character, that that kind of whatever that trauma is, I think that leads me to it when I get to my kind of more in-depth, kinda, like, bigger kind of, my character profile sheet when I'm trying to know all the background details that are, like, for me, that aren't necessarily gonna get communicated to the reader other than through their behaviors, like, in the story. Whatever that trauma is, I think that that helps me as, like, a beacon, to like find what enneagram type that they fit in kind of like more like most succinctly, and I'll usually put them into like one of those kind of like the head, heart, or body kind of like category, like one of those kind of categories, and I'll be like, I think they kind of fit here. And then as I write them a little bit more, I'll start kind of understanding. I'll be like, oh, like they're a little bit more like a 4, and then you keep on going, and then it's just like, no, actually, like they're really like a 5 actually. And then once I kind of get there, then I can kind of find like the subtype, like one of the 27 subtypes underneath there, and then I can kind of slot them in. And when that happens, then on second pass, like kind of going through the whole story and stuff, it's like my mind just explodes. Yeah, it just snowballs. Like it's just like, oh, now they would do this here, like oh, they would absolutely like change their mind here, or they would act this way here. And um, yeah, I feel like it's funny. It all kind of starts with that trauma, though. Like figuring
Yeah.
out what that character's
Love
trauma in the story.
the great, start with the trauma.
Hmm.
Um, the other thing you said head, heart, and body types, and the Enneagram. Like in that Michael Chekhov technique, he has 3 kinds of people, and they're head, heart, and body people. But each
Mm.
one is associated with a specific image, and so like a head person, rather than thinking I am a heady character, what you do is you have a particular image that you attach to that type of person,
Mm.
and each has their own image that you can play with. So it's stick, ball, veil, stick, ball, and veil. So like head types are sticks, and it doesn't have to be one kind of stick. It can be bamboo, it could be a
Mm.
sword, it can be anything, right? And then you have the ball. So that's the head type. You start to think more like a stick.
You're more rigid, but there's different types of woods. Like you can be more flexible. Some people are really rigid and snap. Some people are like kind of dry and humorless. Like other people are, damp and sink. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Ball. So this is your body type. This is your 8, 9, and your 1, right? And the ball can be a bouncy ball. It could be a deflated volleyball. It could be a boulder, right? It can be any kind of thing, but that person doesn't stop moving, right? And
Mhm.
that's the whole thing, oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. Like it's like if you get that ball energy going, it's very different than if you're a veil where you're moved by your breath.
Hmm.
Like this heart type, this feeler type is one of the hardest ones for a lot of actors to do because what you have to do, the image of a veil, it could just as easily be chainmail. The main thing is that you're not responsible for the movement. Your breath is.
Hmm.
And
Okay. Can,
so
can you can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Like,
So like this idea of like I'm imagining that my body is a curtain. So
hmm,
like Hamlet is a veil type for sure, and so he has to wait for the real thing to happen before he can speak. It's
hmm,
got so it could look like, you know, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. you
hmm,
know like the image that I'm attaching, I'm not saying I'm a feeling type, I'm saying I'm like a ragged curtain that's got slits and holes cut in it you know
hmm,
and like lots of little image, like if back to that thing of atmosphere and image, if we lead with atmosphere and image and we inject it into everything, it
hmm.
the whole work in the first draft. So
I find it really. I don't know why this kind of came to mind, but like when you were like used the description of like a ragged like curtain for this kind of like character, it makes me wonder if sometimes I like playing with this idea a lot too, where like a character believes that they're another type. Like I imagine a veil type could very often fall into the category of thinking that they're a head type, not realizing that like their feelings are the things that are really kind of tugging them around in their decisions. That's so fun. And like having that kind of revelation for a character is a really fun idea to kind of play around with too, because like for me personally, like when I like discerned what my enneagram type was and kind of dug into that a little bit more and like was really real with myself, I felt like I had a superpower. I was like, oh, like that's where my confidence comes from. Like nobody can stop me now. Like I'm inevitable. Like and that was a cool feeling. But like before I dug into myself and looked inward, like as like a lot of characters I think tend to do in stories, like they don't they ignore themselves. It's actually, I feel like that whole kind of thing that I just described to you is like a big kind of idea that I'm trying to imbue into like the main character of my story that I'm writing right now. Like they're kind of like an unreliable narrator and they're kind of a dick and like you don't understand why, but they're really compelling because you don't know why, but like you see some good in them, but then you see like a lot of bad in them as well. And then when you kind of come to like this big kind of like twist moment where like you find out like why they are the way that they are, I think for that character it's like that moment where they realize they're like, I'm trying to be somebody that I'm not, and that's going to kill me. And like it's it's really fun to play with that idea.
I think at least one of your characters should have that, should
Hmm.
have a vibe to it. Because I think that that's a really interesting angle
Hmm. Well, like one of the
of
themes that I've noticed come up in. Oh, sorry, say.
of the short film specifically.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I won't go on like a big tangent with like my story and stuff like that. I'd prefer for it to speak for itself. But one of the themes that I did find in the story that I'm writing right now is this personal duplicity through like a lot of these characters, where like whether they are accepting that they have another aspect they have to abide by, whether they are forced to abide by another like facade that isn't like truly them, or whether they think that they're somebody else. And the three POVs that I have in the story, like it literally runs into that. Like one of them genuinely believes that they are what they say that they are and they're just wrong, and like that's the truth that they need to kind of like come to, and like that's the revelation that they have to dispel that kind of misbelief of themselves.
Mm.
and that's what helps him kind of grow as a character. Whereas like another one is, very self-assured. She knows exactly who she is, but the antagonist of the story has kind of hexed them and cast an illusion and like made them not look like themselves, and they're kind of forced to be kind of like a slave person that's kind of like run off of their feet, like taking care of the antagonists kind of day to day, and their interiority is just like a burning fire, just like waiting to get out. And like when they find ways of kind of circumventing this hex and doing so, that's where the character just feels so powerful and like shines. Like they believe that like a strong offense is the best defense kind of thing, but they're forced in a situation where they're not allowed to defend themselves. And it's like, it's a really cool kind of dynamic to play with. And then the third POV that I'm writing from, the character is an alcoholic, and he's very aware that when he descends into drinking, he's even goes as far as to name his alternative self and like kind of keeps logs between him, his sober self, and his intoxicated self in a little journal that he has. And he has to kind of like interpret that and suffer the consequences of this like other self that he blames his entire life for, but continues to keep letting out by imbibing in the drink, right? And it's really fun noticing that theme in those characters, like, and how they kind of like they came out in the story, and seeing how all those characters dispel those versions of themselves, and just like really by the end twisting the reader's expectations and seeing what versions of themselves end up actually sticking by the end of the story. That's really oh man,
That's awesome, dude.
yeah,
Awesome.
I won't wax poetic too much about my story, because I should probably be doing that on on my Substack pretty soon
No,
here.
no.
But
I mean, if you don't talk about it, people won't know.
yeah, no, I think just my thing right now is like I'm trying to temper my own expectations and
Mhm.
just get everything out and done before I keep on trying to talk about it and share with it, because I feel I've noticed a pattern in my behavior before where if I externalize by talking about the ideas with other people, that was like the cheap dopamine that felt good enough. But if I sit down and
Mm.
work and write it all out and actually turn it into something, that's the earned dopamine that like I want to build a habit around chasing. So
Mm.
I try to limit my my excitement around it until I have something to show.
Hey, that's fair, man. That's absolutely fair. What's the name of your story again?
My working title right now is The Blood Curse, but I'm I'm probably going to end up changing it. Like I don't think that I'm
Okay.
going to stick with The Blood Curse as the title, because um spoilers for you and the three other people that are viewing.
And
um
hello, by the way.
and hello everybody. Yeah. Uh I like the Blood Curse is kind of like the crux of the story. Like it's the reason for the story. It is a it's something that kind of happens with like throughout the crux of the narrative that
Mm.
forever changes the world, like in a way that's completely irreversible, and it introduces like my own kind of flavor of vampirism into a world that didn't have it before. And
That's
it's a
sick.
really and thanks and like it's fun because it also is a unique way of like when somebody is infected as a vampire and they understand magic in the way that my magic system functions, it circumvents the existing magic system in a way that gives them
Mm.
powers that are new to the world, and like kind of like an exception to the rules. And the whole like the next two kind of books really explore that idea and like what it means to be able to kind of circumvent these systems that um that certain characters in the world would sooner have left hidden or forgotten to time, because at this point there's so many things that have happened in the world where people just kind of believe that magic doesn't exist, and the ones that do, one's trying to hide it and the other one is trying to create this curse. So I
Mhm.
feel like that title kind of creates a bit of like a spoiler kind of paradox. So I'm probably going to change the title to something else. I don't know what yet.
What are your
That's the main
three
working
main
title.
characters' names?
My first character's like the main like protagonist character's name is Nalira. The secondary character is a dwarven man. His name is Yugdolt Wyventunder. And then
Hell yeah.
the
Yugdolt.
third, yeah, Yugdolt, and he sounds like that's the
He
most
sounds like a
dwarf name
Yugdolt.
ever. Yeah. Until he gets cursed, he loses his voice. He has to become a man of actions because he's also a fucking liar. Uh, but then the third
Yugdolt the
POV,
liar. That's sick, dude.
well, Yugdolt the liar, until he loses his voice through this curse, then he
Mhm.
becomes Yugdolt the silently violent, and
Mhm.
and that's not a moniker he is proud of when he finds out where it comes from. It's a really I just love writing all these characters. But
Yeah.
the third character's POV is a daughter of a duke, but she was kidnapped when she like by the antagonist of the story when she was young for a reason that you don't find out until like the twist kind of point of the story. And her name is Lady Braylon Heartache, and she
Mm.
is
Lady
um
Heartache. That's pretty cool. That might
yeah,
be a good title, honestly.
Lady
And if
Heartache.
not for this book, then another one.
Yeah, I mean, I have like a loose outline for like 8 more books in my head already, and
Mhm.
that character ends up becoming a super. I mean, all these characters become super influential to like the world and like how things function, especially after like where I take it to in the trilogy, because the whole world is changed irrevocably after the events of like this trilogy that I'm writing, and then it descends into this kind of post-apocalyptic kind of dark fantasy with like a fingerprint of like sci-fi on it in a way that feels
Mm.
um I'm sure that there's like a lot of stuff out there. Like I feel like it evokes like things like Empyrean or like Dune and stuff like that, to
Yeah.
a certain degree. But I think the way I write is a little more light, and I try to put a lot of emphasis on making the way that I write very, very clear and easy to understand. Um,
Mm.
because again, I think that that's a practice of like trying to temper my the way that I write and not try to like for lack of a better term, just like you masturbate on the page and kind of show people like, oh, look at my flowery language. Like I started as a poet, and I love writing poetry, but um, there isn't space for that to be in every single line of my prose.
Mm.
So what I wanted to do is just make
We are.
sure that I'm
Right.
yeah. Well, yeah, I found I was getting like irritated with myself when I was like reading through my stuff. I was like, man, I sound like a fucking asshole. So like I I started to dial back on that, and what I've been trying to do is like hide really powerful kind of like imagery and like strong wording, and like I just really dial it back and kind of put like certain lines into my prose and stuff like that in ways that I think would catch people off guard. But like when they read it through again, they're like, "That's actually like cool or like really beautiful."
Mm.
Like an example that comes to mind is um, Braylon and Nalira have like a conflict in a chapter that I just wrote recently, and one of the things that Braylon realizes, like they're trying to reason with her, or like they're trying to Braylon's trying to reason with Nalira. They're not having a successful time at doing so, and they're also limited in what they're able to communicate in the scene. And then she has this kind of interiority of thinking like, like, oh no, like like this is bad. Nalira is heir to the same. Nalira is heir to the same deregulation, not deregulation. I gotta find the actual like quote because I'm gonna butcher my own work if I don't. But she's heir to the same reactions that like the rest of all living beings have, or something to that effect. And like
Mm.
when I kind of went back and kind of read it, I was like, yo, actually, like I'm kind of
That's
proud
a
of that
pretty good
line. Like,
line.
yeah, like and like I'll find one or two of those like throughout every single chapter. So like I'm not
Yeah,
always
yeah,
trying to like display my writing ilk to everybody. I just really want to tell like a really good story. But and then
yeah.
I hide poems in between like the different parts of the story as well, or not hide, but I put a poem that's kind of a theme of that section of the story,
Mm.
um, and I feel like that helped me to be like, there's enough poetry in here now that I don't need to like be flowery with my language all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
um, I'm just trying to find that one line here. This was bad. Nalira was incapable of reading between her words. They were heir to the same survival instincts as any other living being. She almost felt bad for them, knowing how maddening it was to fail communicating her side of the shared plight.
Mm. The fair plight.
Hmm.
Yeah, I love
And
it.
like one character just not knowing that they're part of a shared plight. It's like, idiot, listen.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome, man.
Mhm.
Absolutely awesome. And I love hearing about it. It's a cool world. I'm always interested in interesting characters in an interesting world that feels alive. That
Mm.
feels like it's always changing because stories are about change, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I have to go. I have to eat something, and I'm hosting an open mic tonight.
Mhm.
But Danny Andrucci, thank you so much for hopping on this with me. I would love to do this again sometime soon. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, let's do that. I started a little Substack template here, and I got your email as well. So what I'll
Sick.
do is I'll fill out like my little 1 page idea that I have,
Yeah.
and just with like this van for life or van on the
Van
sea
for
kind of idea,
life. Van for
and
life.
we'll
I love it. Van for
yeah,
life.
I'll email you the document as well afterwards, and you can just drag and drop it into an Obsidian thing, and you can kind of see
Sick.
it as well, and we can kind of collab on it.
Yeah.
And we can kind of talk about it more then. And then also, if you just want to do like another live where we just talk about and kind of promote our stories and stuff, I'd love to do that too. Because
Yeah.
um, I said that I said that I wouldn't go off on my own thing, and then I realized it was bleeding out of me because I just can't stop myself.
I know I'm the same. I think we're birds of a feather, man. We really are all very similar in a lot of ways. That's kind of uncanny. Uh, I think the more we
Quantumly
talk, the more
entangled.
it's going to be like, are we? Wait, if we get in a room, is something bad going to happen? Like,
Me, you.
yeah, the Spider-Man thing, right? But
Yeah, yeah.
would love it. So yeah, so maybe we can message back and forth about the project, and maybe we can just do another Substack where we read as some excerpts of our books because like I'm the same way. I just want to talk about Nala Saga all day long. You know, I've
Hmm.
got 31 books and like 16 adventure modules and a couple game systems that are all set in this world. You know, I'm very excited about orcs.
Yeah, no kidding.
Wait, you sick out. Um but yeah, I would love to maybe we can do another Substack live and just read some excerpts, you know?
Yeah,
We can
yeah.
read
I
each
I would love that.
other.
Yeah, no, I think I'd love to hear my book in your voice.
Yeah, and vice versa. You know, I love hearing. It's so like I wonder if you feel the same way, but it's so you read the same thing over and over again, and you do sort of get locked into something.
Hmm.
And then you know, one of my favorite playwrights, her name is Maria Irene Fornes, Fornes. Fornes. She wrote a great play called Mud. She wrote a lot of great plays. She wrote a great promenade play. But what she would do, she was a Seattle. She was like from. She was an immigrant, but she did a lot of. She was from Seattle. Like she did a lot of work in Seattle, and which is where I went to acting school. And so we talked a lot about Fornes. And what she would do is she would write a play,
Hmm.
and then she would produce it once, and then she would produce it twice, and then she would do all of her edits, and she would say, "Now it is the world's. You know, now it's out of my hands." And
Hmm.
that was what her process was like. And I was just so inspired by that because it is the difference between film and theater. You know, like a film is a canon experience, but a
Hmm.
play, by its very nature, you know, I talk about like to make a story world, you have to have a closed cosmos. You know, the gods do something that only the author decides, and it's got to have open arenas where the audience gets to decide what's canon. And that's
Hmm.
why Pokemon is big. That's why Star Wars is big because they let people make their own canon and
Hmm.
they make it matter. You know, and I think that plays by their very nature, you know, they have that aspect to it. A really famous play, the thing that is exciting about going to see Shakespeare is like, oh my God, they're doing Taming of the Shrew, but it's white trash, which is one of the
Yeah,
best plays that I've ever seen in my life. You know, that was a
yeah.
great play. You know, it's Hamlet, but it's set in you know, the most violent part of the history of the IRA in Ireland or something like that. You know, it would be very different. It'd be very
Yeah.
different.
But yeah, like I love that idea of things being iterated upon. You're right, in a closed universe like a novel or like just kind of like a really tight story. It's hard to evoke that like that different perspective and like give people the ability to kind of like play with or like mess with ideas. And I think there are certain aspects of the way that I write that try to kind of play with the world building in a way that like I have my own kind of like head canon of like what it is, but I also know that every single one of my characters believe different things. So I show it from
Mm,
all these different perspectives and all these different opinions without necessarily repeating things because I feel like people would get bored if I was repeating things all the time. But just
mm,
showing it from so many different perspectives that the reader themselves starts to kind of explore with that idea and be like, I wonder what's true, or like maybe this is it, or maybe all of them are wrong because I've seen them fail. And like,
yeah.
that's so important to me in a story, just to make sure that once it's done, like I can kind of like ruminate on it and let myself think about it more and just be like, oh, like I wonder what would happen if this, and so on and so forth. And like being able to insert myself into that, I want that for everyone that reads my story as well, because that's why we read. Is to move ourselves from our own perspective, right? Like I'm just a single POV in a sea of perspectives.
Yeah, that's wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
All right, man.
Oh,
I really do have to go now. But hey,
absolutely.
Alexei Zaitsev, thanks for hanging. Quentin, and then Stories Sown with Hope. I think it's Alexei who said that my shirt was like chicken ramen, and that's what I'm about to go have, man. How did you know?
Whoa, the prophet. I like it.
Yeah, the prophet, Alexei the prophet. All right, man. Well, I
Well,
hope you have a great day, Danny. I really appreciate you talking about your story today.
yeah, it was great talking to you, Anthony. And yeah, I'll send you the one page here, and we'll reconvene another day and take over the world soon enough.
Let's make this happen.
Yeah, man.
Cool. See you later.
See you, brother.